Hey everyone, we're just going to give it another minute for some more folks to join before we get started. Alrighty, I'm going to get us started for this evening. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the public review meeting for the 99% solid waste management draft. Thank you all for joining us tonight. A quick housekeeping note, this meeting will be recorded and it will be published on our website for viewing later. I'm Sophia Hossein. I'm Zero Waste Manager for the Office of Waste Diversion here at DPW's Bureau of Solid Waste. We're so happy you could all join us tonight. Updating this plan has been a major team effort. The Office of Waste Diversion is leading the revision of this plan with help from the Bureau of Water and Wastewater, the Office of Sustainability, the Departments of Health, Housing, Planning, and more. We're also working in collaboration with Geosyntec, the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority, and Gavin, who are helping us track and incorporate input from stakeholders across the city as we update this plan in accordance with the regulations set by the Maryland Department of the Environment. Here with us from the city's Office of Waste Diversion, we have Megan Resler, Kalia Jordan, and Kara Murray. We also have on the line Steve Sprague from the authority. Tonight, you'll also be hearing from Faith Ezel from Geosyntec and Sean O'Donnell, who have been helping us with the technical aspects of this plan's update. Amanda Martin from Gavin will be moderating comments this evening. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Faith Ezel at Geosyntec to get us rolling.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Good evening, everyone. And today, to go over to the agenda with you all, first and foremost, we'll go over WebEx functionality and the testimonial instructions. Next, we will discuss the background and purpose of the plan. Then we will do an overview of the current waste infrastructure and programs. The next item will be the plan of action. We will discuss the resources and community input, and we will conclude our evening by taking testimonials. So first and foremost, some notes about WebEx functionality and testimonials. As noted before, this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be published publicly on the DPW webpage. Live transcription service is available by clicking on the CC button on the bottom left of your screen on your device. If you're unable to hear audio at this time, please make sure to click the and check your audio settings on that device. If you're unable to hear that audio still, please use the chat feature to look for additional help, and a DPW member will be with you to provide assistance. Following the end of the technical presentation, attendees will have the opportunity to provide a 2-minute oral testimony. If you would like to provide your testimony via the chat, you can use the chat to all panelists and interpreters feature using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. There will be further instructions on how to give testimony following the technical presentation. In addition, if your name will be called on if you decide to provide verbal testimony, and therefore it will be made public via the recording. And all comments will be available on DPW's webpage following the presentation. All written and oral testimony received tonight will be considered for incorporation in the next iteration of the plan. So regarding comments and questions, this evening we will not be responding to questions or comments regarding the plan's content. This will allow us to receive the maximum number of comments from stakeholders and residents. If you have logistical questions, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen to submit these questions. Some examples are below, which include, will my comments be considered? Where will the meeting recording and slide deck be posted? How can I submit feedback after the meeting? How do I turn on closed captioning? And where can I read the plan? So just a little bit of background on the solid waste management plan. This is a plan that discusses the strategies to enhance the solid waste programs and infrastructure within the 10-year planning period. This is a regulatory-driven plan. Therefore, the plan follows content and format guidelines, which have been set forth by the state of Maryland. This plan will be submitted to the Maryland Department of the Environment. The plan is broken down into 5 sections. The first section includes an overview of the goals, city structure, and regulatory guidelines. The next section includes information on the background on population information, zoning requirements, and federal facilities within the city. Section 3 includes an overview of the existing system. Section 4 is an assessment of needs and constraints. And Section 5 is the plan of action to achieve these goals within the 10-year planning period. Sources of information include population estimates, historical data, tonnage reports, and numerous city planning documents, including but not limited to the Less Waste, Better Baltimore Plan, Sustainability Plan, the Zero Waste Plan, and the Climate Action Plan, to name a few. Public input is crucial, and we want to receive feedback about your priorities and goals to help inform this plan, and we will discuss how to do so later on in the presentation. The plan development has been broken down into 4 basic stages. The 60% and the 90% draft phases have been completed, and each had a public meeting associated with it. We are currently at the 99% phase of development, which means that the plan and supporting documents have been completed. Feedback received during the 90 and 60% periods have been considered for incorporation within this draft. And tonight, this is the meeting associated with this draft. The 100% draft, or the final draft, will also be completed with feedback from the 99% draft considered. This next phase will have 2 public meetings associated with it, and we'll have an in-person and virtual option for each. Following this stage, the plan will be sent for state approval and adoption by Baltimore City Council. As mentioned before, there are public meetings associated with this plan. Tonight, we are hosting the 99% virtual meeting. We have 2 more that have been planned. They will each have a virtual and in-person option. And we hosted 2 prior events for the 60 and 90% drafts. In addition to public meetings, we also have a couple other key events we wanted to note here. So you'll see in April, we have a planning commission meeting, which will take place. Following that, the draft will be submitted to the state in May. In August, we plan to have the draft approved by the state. And in December, the draft will be submitted to the mayor and city council for formal adoption. Following that, in January of 2024, the plan will go into effect. So now I'm going to pass it to my colleague and the technical lead for Geosyntec, Sean O'Donnell, who will give us an overview of the current waste infrastructure and programs.
Thanks a lot, Faith. All right, so the next section of this presentation is going to focus on the current system, the current solid waste management system in the city, followed by a summary of the plan of action that the city intends to take over the planning period. Okay, next slide. All right, so first I just want to note that waste is managed by both the city and the private sector in Baltimore. So the city primarily manages residential waste, while the private sector primarily manages waste from the commercial, industrial, and institutional sectors. So this presentation and the plan focus predominantly on the city managed sector, as that is the component of the waste system that is in the direct control of the city. Although you will see in the plan of action section, there are plenty of action items associated with improving the private system as well. All right, so starting off here, this is a map of the existing solid waste facilities in the city, predominantly used in the city managed system. So starting off in black, These are the 5 full-service residence drop-off centers located in the city at Quarantine Road Landfill down at Hawkins Point, Reedbird Avenue in the southwest, Bowley's Lane on the east side, Sisson Street, and then the Northwest Transfer Station located on the northwest of the city. The transfer station, in addition to hosting a convenience center, is also a transfer station for waste and recyclables collected curbside in the city, where those materials are consolidated and then sent for either final disposal or for recycling. Shown in green on this map, there are also 3 locations where only recyclables are accepted from residents. Those are at York Road, Calverton Road, and Lewin Avenue. In yellow, that's the Camp Small facility, which is operated by the Department of Recreation and Parks, where wood waste is processed and sold. So that facility sells prime logs, wood rounds, and mulch. Shown in red down in Hawkins Point is the Quarantine Road landfill. This landfill is operated by the city and accepts waste predominantly from residents and small haulers. The Win Waste facility, shown in gray, is a private waste-to-energy incinerator. It accepts waste from the residential and commercial sectors, and the city currently contracts with them to accept residential waste. And then finally, shown in blue, outside of the city, is Waste Management Recycle America. That's the current facility where the city contracts to send single-stream recyclables, where those materials are processed and recycled. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is a brief summary of the existing recycling and diversion efforts in the city. So here I did want to make the distinction between, in the plan, we talk a lot about reduction and diversion. So I wanted to kind of specify what the difference is and how it's used in the plan. So first of all, reduction for the plan includes any initiatives that are meant to prevent a material from becoming waste. So that can include both true source reduction, for example, like reducing the amount of food waste that somebody might buy, reducing the amount of food that somebody might buy to reduce the amount of wastage. So that would be true source reduction, or also reuse or donation. So for example, materials that could be donated or swapped at a swap event so that they never actually become waste. And then for the purposes of this plan, diversion includes recycling or composting, basically processes meant to convert or divert materials from the waste stream for use elsewhere. All right, so looking at source reduction and diversion initiatives that are currently offered by the city, they include the polystyrene and plastic bag bans. So these bans are meant to limit single-use items. These materials are also very hard to manage at recycling facilities, so they are meant to reduce the amount of material that ends up at recycling facilities to improve the efficiency of those facilities. There's also the recycling can program. So beginning in 2021, free 65-gallon lidded recycling carts were distributed to over 170,000 households for curbside collection of recyclables. There are also recycling initiatives in city schools. These include education and outreach initiatives, as well as the Eco Warriors program, which is a recycling competition among city schools. And then finally, outreach events and social media, which includes the Recycle Right webpage that provides guidance on recycling and promotes source reduction. The city also distributes news and educational materials through social media, including Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Nextdoor, and Twitter. The city also currently operates a curbside recycling program that offers bi-weekly curbside collection of single-stream recyclables. I want to note here that this did change. So it used to be a weekly collection program, but due to staffing shortages and other issues faced during the COVID pandemic, it was reduced to bi-weekly. It is the city's intention to get this back to a weekly initiative. Materials accepted in the curbside collection program include aluminum, steel and tin cans, cardboard, glass containers, mixed paper, and plastic bottles and jars. And then finally, organics diversion and composting initiatives in the city. These include public education programs promoting grass cycling and at-home composting, as well as food scrap collection at residential drop-off centers and the farmers market. Next slide. All right, so the next 2 slides are really a brief assessment of the city's current recycling program. So on this slide, what we're showing is the state measured recycling rate in the city over the last 10 years. And I want to note here that this only includes municipal solid waste, or MSW, which is normal everyday trash that may be collected from households, businesses, and businesses, and includes things like paper and cardboard, plastic, metals such as cans or appliances, glass containers, compostables like yard waste and food waste, and then a few miscellaneous other materials like tires or bulk waste, anything else that you can think of that might be a household waste. What this does not show is materials like construction and demolition debris, scrap metal, soil, or sewage sludge. So I just want to make that very clear here. We are looking only at the materials that are counted towards the city's recycling rate by the state. And what I also want to note here is that the city actually recycles more of those non-counted materials, but they are not shown here. So the trends that I want to kind of highlight on this graph are, one, that the city has not in the last 10 years ever reached the state mandated goal of 35%. So the goal for this solid waste management plan over the next 10 years is to achieve that 35% recycling goal. Other trends that are kind of important here to note are the size of that gray bar. So this is the composition of the recyclables that were recycled in any given year. So you can see that gray bar decreases significantly between 2012 and 2013. That's really just the way that the state started counting recyclables. So prior to 2013, the state counted ash that was disposed at Quarantine Road landfill as a recyclable material. That no longer counted in 2013. So you'll see that decrease in the gray bar. Other trends that I want to note are the generally increasing trend in recycling rate between 2013 and 2021. The intention is to accelerate that increasing trend so that we can meet that 35% goal over the planning period. And then also that dip that you see in 2020 predominantly is attributed to the COVID pandemic. All right, next slide. So this slide summarizes the city's long-term solid waste goals. So those are shown on the right there. So those goals are both reduction and diversion goals. They come from a variety of city planning documents, including the Baltimore Food Waste Recovery Strategy, for example, for food waste, the Baltimore Sustainability Plan, and the Less Waste Better Baltimore Plan. So these goals are not necessarily expected to be met during the next 10 years, which is the planning period for the current solid waste management plan. They are long-term in nature. And so it is important to note that they are long-term. So if you look in the third column where it says 2020 diversion rate, you can see all the ones in red are where the city is not currently meeting their goals. Again, that's okay. The city intends to work towards these goals over the planning period. But what I wanted to highlight here is the main opportunities for the city. So for example, with food waste, the current diversion rates are very low. So there's a very big opportunity to divert additional food waste and yard waste where current diversion rates are less than 10%. There's also a significant opportunity for the city to improve diversion of traditional recyclables, including paper, plastic, glass, and metals, where the current residential rate, that's again the waste stream managed by the city, is less than 20%. All right, next slide. All right, so the next few slides here are going to actually go through the specific plan of action that the city intends to take over the planning period to improve diversion and improve the efficiency of the solid waste system. Next slide. All right, so looking first at waste and recycling collection, focusing on recycling collection, the city intends to update its existing fleet by purchasing additional trucks and improving maintenance of their existing fleet to keep those vehicles up and running and improve the efficiency of recycling collection. The city also intends to improve worker retention and hire additional workers. Combined with updating the existing equipment and the fleet, the city intends to, reinstate weekly collection. So by improving the quality of the fleet and also improving worker retention, they believe that they can reinstate weekly collection. The city also intends to improve residents' drop-off centers by making them more accessible, and then also increasing and improving the amount of materials that are recycled at those locations. And then finally, improving education and outreach, predominantly focused on changing behaviors and habits to promote recycling or diversion. Looking at trash collection, again, some of the same action items, improve updating equipment, so updating the collection fleet and improving worker retention. This will improve trash collection efficiency in the city. Also supporting waste reduction initiatives by reducing the amount of waste that is actually disposed. The city will have to collect less, which can improve efficiency. And then finally, improving education and outreach by informing citizens about best practices, for example, bagging waste, what materials are recyclable versus trash, so what goes in which bin, those types of things. And then looking at litter and illegal dumping. So the city has a four-pronged approach toward reducing litter and illegal dumping in the city that improves first, improving cleanup. So improving response times and getting those that litter and illegal dumping cleaned up as quickly as possible to remove urban blight. Secondly, engaging with local community members to change habits and reduce litter and improve reporting of illegal dumping. Third, looking at improving reporting and enforcement, both by working with local community members, but also by catching and fining those responsible for illegal dumping in the city. And then finally, supporting vulnerable communities. So illegal dumping and litter are most prevalent in low-income vulnerable communities. So by engaging with and focusing on these communities, it's an opportunity for the city to improve equity with respect to litter and illegal dumping. Next slide. All right, this is a summary of the plan to improve recycling in the city. So this is broken into three sections: legislative, administrative, and programmatic actions that the city intends to take over the planning period. So looking at legislative actions, the city intends to support legislation that bans recyclables from disposal. So there are already a number of examples at the state level, for example, for tires or yard waste. By expanding these to additional materials, the city believes that they can improve diversion of recyclable materials. Also supporting legislation requiring mandatory commercial recycling and reporting to improve the reporting and improve the state reported recycling rate in the city. Also supporting legislation that creates enforcement mechanisms for existing recycling mandates, for example, from apartment complexes, condominiums, office buildings, and schools. The city believes that they can improve reporting and then also improve compliance with those mandates. Administrative actions include improving education and outreach, primarily through community engagement, to change behaviors and promote additional recycling. Incentivizing growth of local recycling markets by holding market development workshops or advocating for green procurement processes. And then also assessing funding mechanisms for waste diversion initiatives by developing a comprehensive capital, operational, and fiscal study. Looking at programmatic actions that the city intends to take. First off, by improving recycling in public spaces, by deploying additional recycling cans and also potentially using cans with different shaped openings to promote source separation and proper recycling. Reinstating weekly recycling collection and optimizing collection routes. As stated previously, that is a priority for the city to get back to weekly recycling collection. And then also, finally offering green business certifications to promote waste diversion initiatives in the private sector and to build a network of organizations that report and measure waste streams. And by implementing these action items, the city estimates that they can improve diversion, so the diversion potential would be about approximately 125,000 tons of additional recyclable material per year that could be collected. Next slide. All right, looking at the plan to improve organics diversion. So this is broken down into three categories as well: reducing food wastage, increasing organics diversion efforts, and encouraging in-city composting. So looking first at reducing food wastage, the city intends to consult the Baltimore Food Waste Recovery Strategy, which is full of ideas and opportunities to reduce food wastage. And by implementing these suggestions, the city intends to significantly reduce the amount of food that's wasted. Improving education and outreach through community engagement, changing habits and behaviors to reduce food wastage and encourage food donation. And then also by supporting state mandates banning food waste disposal, and then other legislative actions such as supporting the expansion of liability protections for food donations and supporting legislation that enforces existing organics disposal bans. Looking at increasing organics diversion efforts, the city intends to encourage and support backyard and community composting. The city also intends to initiate a pilot organics collection program by expanding the current organics collection program from residence drop-off centers to potentially schools, government buildings, and then also looking at increasing to a curbside collection program for residential neighborhoods. And then finally, also by improving education and outreach so that residents are aware of what materials can be diverted into the green bins at these locations and what materials can be collected for composting. Then finally, looking at encouraging in-city composting. So the city intends to engage the private and public sector to construct in-city composting facilities, which is really important because there currently are not any facilities in the city that accept food waste and yard waste, large scale facilities anyway. The city also intends to offer community workshops and training opportunities for residents and those who are interested in participating in community composting programs. And then also finally supporting residents interested in obtaining compost operator certification. So the city estimates that by implementing this plan of action, the reduction potential, the amount of food waste that could be reduced from disposal, is estimated to be about 25,000 tons per year. And the diversion potential, the amount of material that could be diverted to composting, is about 19,600 tons per year. Next slide. All right, so the plan of action to improve education and outreach. So education and outreach, as you probably noticed, was an action item for many of the other categories that were listed for recycling, collection, and organics. So I wanted to kind of focus on what that means and what the city actually intends to do to improve education and outreach. All right, so looking first at community engaged planning. So the city intends to hold community engaged seminars focused on underserved communities. These seminars are intended to build public understanding of the connections between zero waste, recycling, health, climate change, and local environmental, social, and economic justice and resiliency. They are also intended to gather data on residents' attitudes, beliefs, concerns, barriers, and motivations related to recycling, and then also gather group pledges to foster behavior change. The city also intends to set up a zero waste coalition that would be focused on connecting stakeholders from the residential, institutional, and food service sectors to work with the city to identify barriers, benefits, and priorities for zero waste programs and services. Also, as part of the plan to improve education and outreach, the city intends to develop and deploy resources and strategic messaging. So resources could include things like guides for hard to recycle materials, food waste, and reuse directories. It also includes 4-part educational modules on recycling and reuse for public schools. These would be include game-based knowledge checks, hands-on recycling activities, teacher resources, and prizes like reusable water bottles, utensils, or lunchboxes. And then finally, looking at community-based social marketing campaign. So with that, the city would work with a communications experts to design and implement social marketing campaigns to inspire behavior change. And then finally, as part of the plan to improve education and outreach, the city intends to hold a variety of workshops, including repair clinics, circular cooking classes, community recycling sorts, creative reuse classes, and then composting workshops and training sessions to improve backyard composting, but also to help support community composting efforts within the city. Next slide. All right, and then finally, the plan to improve waste disposal and transfer. So although the focus of the plan really is on diversion and reduction of waste, we also do have to look at the waste disposal and transfer in the city. So looking specifically at waste disposal, the first challenge posed by the city is the fact that the Quarantine Road landfill is expected to reach its capacity by 2028, which is during the planning period. So the first priority for the city is to expand the Quarantine Road landfill to increase the amount of capacity so that there's enough space there for disposal to continue through the planning period and beyond. The city also intends to improve landfill operations to improve the efficiency of the landfill, and then also improve waste diversion efforts to reduce the amount of material that is actually sent to final disposal. Another consideration for the city is the fact that the wind waste contract ends in 2031, and so looking at ways to manage their waste after the end of that contract. And then also the final consideration is that there are no additional in-city waste disposal options. So with wind waste ending in 2031 and the Quarantine Road landfill potentially running low on capacity, the city has to focus on other things like specifically improving waste diversion efforts primarily, but then also looking at improving waste transfer. So to improve waste transfer, first of all, the city intends to improve the Northwest Transfer Station operations to improve efficiency and improve the amount of waste that can be transferred through that facility. However, there is no room to expand that facility, so the city is also looking at constructing an additional transfer station on the east side of the city, which would, in the short term, improve the efficiency of waste collection, but in the long term could also be used for a way to transfer waste out of city if necessary in the future. Next slide. All right, and then finally, I just wanted to reiterate that feedback from residents will continue to be encouraged through online, in-person, and community outreach efforts, and comments from stakeholders are being gathered and considered as part of the next draft.
Thank you, Sean. So now we'll do an overview of the resources and community input. So once again, just to reiterate, we will have 2 more meetings associated with this plan. There will be an in-person and a virtual option. You can register using the link underneath the table. And just to give you a little bit more information, the next meeting will be held on Monday, April 10th at the Enoch Pratt Free Library at the Southeast Anchor Branch. And the address is listed on the slide as well as the time. Also note that there will be live Spanish translation available for this in-person meeting option, and you can also register for the online option at the same webpage. The meeting on Monday, April 24th will be held at Arlington Elementary School. It will also be held from 6 to 7:30, and you can register at the same link at the bottom of the slide. Both will also have an online component, so you can register for either using that link. So I just want to point out the other ways that you can provide feedback outside of meetings. So if you'd like to read the draft, provide feedback directly on the draft, or to read the frequently asked questions and comment section, please scan the QR code or visit the webpage using the link listed. If you'd also like to provide questions or feedback via email, please note the email address that's listed on the slide. If you would like to provide written feedback via the mail, please take down the address listed in the middle bubble. And just to reiterate that feedback received during meetings via email, mail, and those posted on the draft will be considered for the next iteration of the plan. And DPW has already received numerous thoughtful comments and questions regarding trash collection, environmental equity and education, legislation, community development, and future waste disposal practices in Baltimore City, just to name a few. And also as a note, if you have general questions regarding city services or other non-plan related questions, please dial 311 to reach a city operator for assistance. If you require additional support related to current city services, please contact the community liaison for your district located in the table to your right. At this time, we will prepare for testimonials. So just a few housekeeping things. Just note that this meeting is being recorded once again. If you would like to provide a verbal testimony, please raise your hand using the hand icon located at the bottom of your screen. You will be put in the order your request is received. We will give you a notification when there's one person ahead of you. When it is your turn, you will be prompted to unmute yourself. You will be limited to a 2-minute verbal testimony. We will give you a 10-second warning and you will receive a 10-second grace period, after which you will be muted. Please locate the timer, which should be located on your device's screen at this time. If you are dialing in with us this evening, please press the *3 button on your device to raise your hand. We will notify you using the first 6 digits of your call-in number, and you'll receive a prompt to unmute yourself when it is your turn. You can do so using the *6 button on your device. If you would like to submit written testimony at this time, please note that you are limited to 1,000 characters in the chat, so you may need to submit multiple messages to cover your entire testimony. Please also note that questions directed towards DPW during verbal testimonies will not be answered at this time. If you have logistical questions, please write them in the chat. And please be respectful to all meeting attendees in the chat and during your verbal testimony. Following this presentation, the webpage will be updated with the FAQ and comments from this testimony. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Amanda, who will facilitate the testimonial portion of this evening. Amanda?
Thank you, Faith. And as Faith mentioned, you can raise your hand for a testimony. We already have a couple of hands raised. Once your hand is raised, I will send a request to unmute you in the order that they were presented. Mike, your hand was raised first. I'm going to send a request to unmute you. When you unmute and begin talking, your time will begin.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So my name is Mike Ebel with Energy Justice Network, and I want to address two issues. One is the lack of contingency planning for if the incinerator abruptly closes. We've seen in a number of other communities, including Detroit, Michigan, Hartford, Connecticut, Lorton, Virginia, Doral, Florida, most recently, where trash incinerators either catch fire or abruptly close for other reasons, some of them permanently. And those locations have had to turn on a dime to find other solutions. Baltimore doesn't have a backup plan that we know of, and we like this plan to include one in case something immediate happens to the incinerator. And we'd like to also see a roadmap for what the estimates are on the Quarantine Road landfill's lifetime. Earlier, it says 2028 it'll fill up before the expansion as planned. With the expansion, we've heard 2052 a few years ago. We also heard that before the expansion will be 2026, not 8. And so somehow 2 years just grew. So getting the information on how long it will last with and without the incinerator and with various zero waste scenarios would be very helpful in especially understanding if there is adequate space there, or if we have to start exporting, which the city has insisted there's not enough space, but we don't all believe that right off. Also, the plan talks about a rail-based transfer station needed, and I would advise that it be a truck-based transfer station, as Montgomery County found when they started realizing that limiting themselves to rail means that there are very few landfill communities they can use, largely majority Black landfill communities in Virginia, or really terribly managed wind waste landfills in Ohio. And so hauling by truck would be cheaper, but also make many other landfills available to choose from that don't violate the Civil Rights Act. Finally, on page 37, it says in the plan that Maryland doesn't allow jurisdictions within the state to enforce more stringent requirements than the state itself when it comes to air quality, and that's just not correct. Federal and state law clearly authorize Maryland counties and municipalities to have their own clean air laws that are as strict or stricter than the state and federal minimums. We can cite that, but in Maryland, this Environment Code 2-104, it's very clear there. And just because one court got it wrong and the appeal was dropped does not change the fact
Thank you, Mike.
that these communities are empowered in this way. Thank you.
Thank you. The next hand raised is Dave Arndt. Dave, I'm going to send a request to unmute you. Your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Hello?
You're unmuted.
Okay. So you can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Great. This is Dave Arndt in Baltimore, Maryland. Thank you for actually allowing us to testify and actually changing parts of your plan as we have already submitted information. Some of the key things that I'd like you to really look at is really to have more measurable goals. I really like the page where you have the long-term goals, but those goals with numbers are stated that they're going to be beyond the time frame of this plan, and therefore there's no need to obtain those goals or actually put in plans in place to obtain those goals. And I'd really like to also put out that saying 10 years is a long term. So you really need to have goals that are really like 3, 5, 7, and 10 years in the plan itself. And they need to be measurable like you do have on that one page where you have the long-term goals. And the goals need to be stated things like meeting the recycling rate, the state recycling rate by 2025. That'd be a great goal to have, and then put plans in place to get there. There also should be goals to really shut down the incinerator and to really stop sending materials to the incinerator, and just let's put a date in there and say by the end of 2026 we're going to stop sending materials to the incinerator, and let's build our plans around that. And the last thing I'd like to have in the plan is actually who is accountable for achieving those goals. So not only have measurements, but which agency and what division of that agency is accountable for achieving those goals. Thank you.
Thank you. The next hand raised is Greg Sawtell. Greg, I'm sending a request to unmute you. And your time will begin when you do.
Good evening, everybody. Greg Sawtell with the Community of Curtis Bay Association. Echoing what Dave and others have said, we applaud many of the comments that are finding their way into the plan. We now have intention to build local compost infrastructure. That was a community-driven call. The plan mentions a zero waste recovery park, again, something that residents have been calling for. So those are positive in the development of a coalition-based approach to solve problems and get things done more quickly, is right on track. Again, what we're looking for, what's missing is the sense of urgency, both in response to unforeseen circumstances of incinerator closure, or a more proactive approach to seeing how quickly we can move towards the consensus goal of moving beyond the worst way of dealing with materials, which is burning them in environmental justice communities and then disposing the toxic ash in environmental justice communities towards zero waste. And what we need is to leverage the fact that voters elected a mayor who made a commitment to do everything he could do to advance zero waste. And we need to honor that commitment in the form of clear funding levels and a time frame that would get us towards that objective, and know if we're on the right track or not. And without that, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to determine if this plan is on track or not. So I think it's fixable, and we have time still before it goes to City Council. But without that information being clearly outlined, residents' ability to determine whether this plan is the plan we need is simply impossible. And therefore, we have to determine that it's a failure as a planning document. And we don't want to be in that situation. We need this plan to serve the function that it's called upon to serve. Last thing, chemical recycling found its way into the plan. An open door for chemical recycling. There's comments posted as to why that's a terrible idea and why we shouldn't open the door to more greenwashing, which is incineration under another name. But we want to focus most of our time on what we need to build upon, and there's a lot of good substance in this plan. But again, we need to tie the specific funding levels needed, along with a clear time frame for reaching those diversion targets. Last thing is,
Greg,
City
I'm
Council
sorry.
did call for that
I'm going
exact
to
plan.
mute
Yeah,
you.
City Council.
You can leave comments in the chat. Thank you. Andy Hines, you are the next hand raised. A reminder, there is a 2-minute timer, a 10-second grace period after your 2-minute testimony. Andy, I'm going to request to unmute you. Your time begins when you begin speaking.
Support what Dave Arndt said, and I believe Greg Sawtell effectively said, and that's that for the plan to be real, there should be a date, a goal date, a certain date to shut down the incinerator. And as I comment every time you give an opportunity to give comments, and I have the opportunity to participate and make it. It really should be a separate, higher priority to close down that incinerator. And we have people's lives at stake here, and we don't seem to be giving it the priority that it needs. So I really think for it to be an actionable plan, put a date in there and let's work toward that. Everybody knows it's what we need to do, and you all can be the leadership and lead us there, and that would be so good. So thank you so much for the opportunity to comment, and thanks for your hard work on the plan. I appreciate it. I'm done.
Thank you, Andy. All right, the next hand raised is Shoshanda. I'm going to request to unmute you. And your time will begin when you begin.
And thank you all for this opportunity, again, as many have said, to be able to testify about this 10-year solid waste plan. And I think what I want to say is I'm Susanna from the South Baltimore Community Land Trust. First, I'll say that. And for many years, starting off with the proposed incinerator when I was a youth, we stopped that incinerator, and then we instantly started working on what are alternatives that we want to see to be able to divert waste from the current incinerator, the Fresco incinerator that we have now, right? And I think for many years, even many years and decades, for some people, we have been talking about how do we actually step away from this burning and burying? And residents have committed to, okay, let's figure out how to move us to a just transition to zero waste. And then we did the best we could do to work with our city to say, hey, city, join us on this thing. And let's step away and phase out this Fresco incinerator. And we thought that we had the city committed to that, because when we had our current mayor, Brandon Scott, who said that he was committed to making sure that we would never have to sign another contract with this Fresco incinerator after it was previously signed by one of our stand-in mayors. And then now we are here for a 10-year solid waste plan, and it lacks that commitment. And so it's really just confusing that it would lack that commitment when that is the biggest commitment to residents. And that is why residents have been working. They have been composting themselves, because that's waste they don't want to see being burned or buried, because it's food waste and it makes no sense. And a plan to me is something that's a detailed proposal that has an intent on what we're trying to achieve. And this plan it has some good things in it. Yes, it has good goals, but it doesn't have any benchmarks really, and it doesn't have a timeline for these goals. And the worst of all, it continues the reliance on the #1 air polluter in Baltimore City, the Fresco incinerator. So it is a slap in the face to all of the residents that heard that commitment from our mayor. And we also see our city leadership trying to walk in a way to move us to a just transition to a zero waste future and away from what we're currently doing. And I think that we have been working really hard to make sure that we as residents are doing the best we can do, and then trusting the city and building that trust back. But I think that this plan breaks that trust if it does not have that commitment to step away from incineration, and it doesn't have that commitment for funding for these alternative solutions.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next hand raised is a call-in user. The first numbers of your phone number are appearing. Well, I'm going to send a request to unmute. 443-467. To unmute, you'll press *6. Are you there? One more time, 443-467. I'm going to send a request to unmute. *6 unmutes.
Hello?
Yes, you can begin now.
All right. So our city's waste collection and reintroduce recycling pickup is not reliable, and I want to see what the city can do to commit to an effective and reliable solution. And I also want to know what will we stop it. City considering the action led by former acting Mayor Jack Young. As a resident of Curtis Bay, I feel as though we need more answers to a clear and direct line of an effective actual zero waste plan. And love you all.
Thank you. The next hand raised is Steph Compton. I'm going to send a request to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, your time will begin now.
Thank you. I wanted to comment on the recommendations for the deconstruction ordinance and just add some questions. Which pieces of the deconstruction mandate can be done, and which one takes executive actions versus which one takes city council action? And then to reference the draft of a local ordinance that was put together by the Energy Justice Network called the Rebuild Act. And the draft of that is accessible on rebuildbmore.org. Moving on to my next comment about the language about referencing trash incineration. And also to clarify that DPW doesn't contract with Wind Waste. It's the mayor and the city council of Baltimore that contract with the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority, also known as the Authority, for use of the Willa Baltimore trash incinerator that's owned by Wind Waste. And the authorities separately contracts with Wind Waste. And then also wanted to clarify that the industry's PR term of waste to energy and WTE, the proper language for that has been pointed out by the EPA multiple times, that the term for this type of facility is a municipal waste combustor, which is also known as a trash incinerator. So to get rid of those PR misleading greenwashing terms. And then moving on to my final point, that the projections assume for recycling rates, the projections assume no waste reduction or reuse. So with the population barely growing over this decade and the implementation of materials bans, save as you throw, the deconstruction mandate, and other recommended zero waste measures, the total waste generated should be dropping significantly over that period. So the recycling and composting rates ought to be ramping up much more than just 35% by 2033. Maryland Environment Code 9-905 required that 35% must be met by 2014. So 20 years after this state mandated goal, this should be beyond this. So a real zero waste plan could have the city at a 60 to 70% diversion rate by then. And I'll end there. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Steph. The next hand raised is Mike Doherty. I'm going to send a request to unmute.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Mike Doherty. I am the market manager overseeing Baltimore for Wind Waste Innovations. We operate the local waste to energy facility, also known as Wheelabrator. Let me start by saying the company supports much of the proposed plan. We'd like to see waste levels reduced in Baltimore. We are one, if not the largest private recycler in the city. Each year we recycle more than 12,000 tons of ferrous and non-ferrous metals. We also partner in Baltimore's largest, most ambitious residential composting initiative with For My City. We're also working with various community partners to clean up illegal dumping sites in the city, and we'd like to formalize a partnership with DPW to continue that. We do not agree with certain aspects of the proposed plan. For one, we don't believe city taxpayers and residents should be responsible for tens of millions of dollars it will take to reconfigure the Northwest transfer station and build a new rail transfer facility. There's one thing everyone in Baltimore seems to agree on. It's that traffic-related air pollution is by far the largest single source of air pollution people breathe. Adding more fossil fuel-driven vehicles on our roads and rail lines is bad for the environment, bad for public health, and bad for Baltimore. Most transfer stations don't address the underlying need to reduce waste. It just takes the waste we already generate, ships it out of town where it will break down in a landfill and emit methane into the atmosphere. Finally, we need a holistic approach to waste management in Baltimore. The EPA and the European Union and experts around the world agree it is better to convert unrecycled waste into energy than to bury it in a landfill. We encourage the city and the state to recognize that reality and continue to use waste to energy for post-recycled material. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next hand raised is Carlos Sanchez. I'll send a request to unmute.
Yeah, everybody can hear me?
Yes, your time starts now.
Okay, I just want to say my name is Carlos Sanchez. I'm with Free Your Voice, and I've done a lot of outreach with residents. I've spoken with them, and this plan is a pretty good plan. It does ask for a good amount of what residents are calling for, but there is a lot of empty holes and a lot of things that are just not clear, and that's not what residents. That's what what residents want is like the funding, and there's no clear funding of how much will be needed for it to get this plan going. There is no time frame, but like everybody has been saying, and there is not that much commitment to making sure that we're ending relationship with Bresco or the incinerator, and that's what residents have been asking for a while. And that's what we are calling. That's what we want. We want a 10-year solid waste plan that will tell residents and assure them that this plan is to break reliance on incineration and landfill. And if you can't put that in the plan, then it's not right to say it, because you're just having residents guessing, and it's not right. This plan is too important for us as residents. It's impacting our health, and it's something that needs to be taken seriously, especially when the residents voted for a mayor who committed for us to break away from Resco as soon as possible. He did commit to getting a compost facility, to getting the funding, moving away from incineration as quickly as possible. And I would say that it will also urge the mayor to come back and tell us as residents if he can't keep his commitment to make sure we don't sign another contract with Bresco or incineration. And that's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next hand raised is Richard Rice. Richard, I'm sending a request to unmute. Richard, I sent a request to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, my name is Richard Reese, and I'm on the executive committee of the Baltimore Sierra Club. I don't speak for them, but I know what they're interested in. This is a good plan. It's a good start. One thing that I really appreciate in there is return to weekly curbside recycling. I think that's been sorely missed, and you said you're going to do it, but you didn't say when. Curbside compost pickup is another good idea in there, but again, no specifics. And I'd like to focus on what many people said, except for the person who represents the commercial interests, and that is close the incinerator. It causes asthma. It's the first thing visitors see when they come into Baltimore, and it's a very bad impression, and it also emits pollution that harms our health. It doesn't really reduce trash, it just converts it into something that's more toxic and causes more harm. So thank you very much for hearing me, and that's it. Bye.
Thank you. The next hand raised belongs to Tiffany. Tiffany, I'm sending a request to unmute.
I'm a current resident of Curtis Bay. I'm growing up in Cherry Hill. I do agree with what a lot of the other callers have said. This plan sounds like it's a good plan. However, it's not actually realistic. Again, there's no measurable outcomes, and maybe I missed it, but partnership seems vague. And we're tired of the broken promises from our officials, government agencies. We've met with them before. They claim to have had all this data to support what they're doing and how they're trying to eliminate the waste in the landfill from polluting the neighborhoods, but they actually didn't have the data. And it was disheartening when I heard something about expanding the landfill and increasing capacity. Like, we've already, as residents of South Baltimore, suffered long enough with what was Bresco right in our backyards. A lot of us is not okay. It needs to be gone. And the transporting of the waste, we've already seen from numerous reports that it's even more hazardous by transporting it by rail. So I just agree with what everybody else has said, and this plan needs revision.
Thank you, Tiffany. The next hand raised belongs to Dante Swinton. Dante, I'm sending a request to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Just want to make clear. My name is Dante Swinton. I'm with our Zero Waste Future. Incineration should have no part in the future of the city. Approximately 75 to 80% of the materials we are sending to the incinerator through public and private sources is reusable, recyclable, or compostable. A real commitment to zero waste eliminates most of the materials that the incinerator burns and puts into the air. It's a real common deflection by wind waste to speak to vehicle pollution, though it itself actually emits enough CO2 to equal the amount of 134,000 cars on the road driving about 12,000 miles a year. So it cannot find its way out of this simply because traffic pollution is also a harm. The plan also should list the different jurisdictions that not only send waste to wind waste, but also to Curtis Bay Energy Medical Waste Incinerator, the largest in the country, which would underscore Baltimore's current role as a regional and national dumping ground. As many have said, there's no real sense of urgency in these plans, just kicking the can down the road 5, 6, 10, 15 years, whatever it may be. When in actuality, we could do things in shorter time frames. There needs to be a cost analysis of the build out of these different facilities in comparison to what it would cost to maintain and the incinerator or improve its pollution controls, as well as the expansion of the city's landfill. It actually costs more to expand the landfill than it would be to build our own material recovery facilities, compost facilities, and the like. And those types of comparisons, as well as the job benefits that are going to come from this for a city like Baltimore that has lost so much manufacturing opportunities over the last 60 years, to be underscored and seen as urgent, as most of the folks that have been on this call have indicated. I don't see that in this plan so far. I really hope that changes. It's not anywhere close to 99% ready. It's probably somewhere more around 40 or 50, and we need to call that out and extend the time before we actually launch this, if possible. Thanks.
Thank you. At this time, there are no hands raised. If you would like to raise your hand, please do so. For anyone on a call-in, you can raise your hand as a participant pressing *3. Jennifer raised her hand. Jennifer, I'm going to send a request to unmute.
Yes, thank you. Jennifer Kunze here with Clean Water Action and resident of McElderry Park. Echoing what others have said, there's a lot of great pieces in this plan, but I'm really concerned about the really specific ways that the steps outlined here are falling short of Mayor Scott's promises around the incinerator. And a lot is from me in the written comments. I'll focus here on organics. Even just to start with, and I know that this is harkening back to earlier plans, that's a whole thing, but the reduction in diversion goals for commercial food waste are 50%, when for residential it's 80%, and we should see a lot more ambition in commercial food waste. It's much lower hanging fruit. You can get more bang for your buck, and there's a lot of underappreciated opportunity, especially because according to page 46, the commercial sector accounts for well over twice the volume of trash as the residential sector. So to start with, the tonnages we're aspiring to for organic waste diversion need to be much higher. And then the plan says that the city can only meet 30% of the reduction potential that comes back from those assumptions within the planning period without really any justification. And that's a really unacceptable lack of ambition, especially when just one of the many composting facilities that are proposed in Chapter 5 could handle that volume of 30% of the reduction potential on its own. And we could be building several. When these figures don't line up, the city needs to be a lot more ambitious. I do want to praise and emphasize how important recommendation 13 in the organic section of Chapter 5 is to assess disposal fee restructuring. This is really important for truly driving the diversion away from Bresco that we need to see, above and beyond the waste that the city hauls itself, looking at the private market, making sure that the city is undercutting the tipping fees and giving haulers a more attractive place to bring their waste, private haulers, is key for getting waste away from Bresco. And then finally, the last page of this plan, when Bresco itself. If the city is taking on this responsibility in a really serious way that right now these steps do not.
Thank you, Jennifer. Your time is up.
we
You can continue your testimony in the comments.
we need to do that to meet Mayor Scott's promises. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next hand raised is Mark Costello. Mark, I'm sending you a request to unmute.
To speak and share my comments on the 10-year solid waste management plan. My name is Mark Costello, concerned citizen, not affiliated with anything else. I live up in Hamden, and I think the plan is pretty good so far. There's a lot of good points laid out, but just to reiterate what some people have said, I think there's a lack of urgency. We're saying that 10 years is not a long-term plan. I think that there's a lot more actionable dates that can be put on it, so to have a date to close the Bresco incinerator and have dates behind that. I think getting a date for when we plan to bring back weekly recycling pickup is pertinent. And I like everything that you have about education and outreach about composting, recyclables, and I think that's all very important because people may have good intentions but not know what to put in their recycling bin or even know facilities exist for dropping off their compost, whether that's the farmer's market or dropping it off at different stations. So I think education surrounding diversion of recyclables and organics is very important. And that is all that I have.
Thank you. The next hand raised is Glenn Tobiasen. I'm sending you a request to unmute.
Am I coming through?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. A lot was said today about the end of the wind waste contract, the Bresco incinerator in 2031, expansion of the Northwest transfer station and all the things that are going along with that, the quarantine landfill, the problems there, and even expanding that after all the troubles they've had there, the rail and trucks going out to different areas to get rid of this waste in some other ways, and people looking for contingency plans because there's no long-term solution right now for taking care of the Bresco plant if it does go down in an emergency with a fire or something like that. We've seen like in Miami-Dade. There is a possibility to have a very short-term 9 to 18 months rollout time of a technology that is proven and exists to take care of all the waste that is currently going to the Bresco plant and take care of it with no emissions, no cost to the city or county or state. They would not have to fund the technology to do so. And the technology is an existing and proven technology that is out there and can be set up, as I said before, 9 to 18 months to take care of all this waste, including more, and eventually also take over and take in the waste that's on the quarantine landfill. If there's more information needed, you can get in touch with me, Glenn Tobiasen at innowacon.com, INNOWACON.com. I'd be glad to talk to you about this and of course with City of Baltimore and the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, there are no hands raised. If you'd like to make a testimony, please raise your hand.
As a reminder here, folks, there are a number of ways you can submit feedback outside of the meeting. I just want to point people once again to the webpage. You can send an email or a mailed version of your comments and feedback. Also, just a reminder that there are two final meetings associated with this plan, and their locations are listed on the screen now and will take place on April 10th and April 24th. And you can register for these events on DPW's webpage. There is a virtual option for both of these meetings as well.
Thank you, Faith. At this time, no hands are raised. If you would like to raise your hand and you are calling in, you can unmute pressing *6. To raise your hand as a call participant, you can press *3. We have a request from a call-in user, 443562, sending you a request to unmute. You can unmute pressing *6.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Peyton Wise. I don't have the plan in front of me actually, but I've looked at it. Can you hear me now? The recording's interrupting.
Yes.
Okay. The plan has commercial waste, residential waste, and mixed solid waste or something like that. Mixed refuse. I don't have it in front of me right this second, but there's no definition of what mixed refuse is. If it's not commercial and it's not residential, and you say commercial includes institutional, I mean, they're basic, and there's a bunch of written stuff, and they mention mixed refuse, and they say most of the mixed refuse is recycled, which, I mean, can't possibly be the case. So maybe there should be more clarification on the types of waste. And also, I don't see, again, I probably should read again more carefully, but there isn't a whole lot of detail on how much waste comes in from the counties to the incinerator in the plan itself, as in Baltimore County or Anne Arundel or anybody else sending waste into the city. And I guess that ash goes into the landfill here. So that's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no raised hands from the attendees at this time.
If we have no more attendees that want to give testimony, we can go ahead and end this meeting 15 minutes early. I just want to thank everyone for their thoughtful comments. We are reading them all, analyzing them all, and incorporating what we can in the plan. You can, like Faith has said, you can visit our webpage, which I just dropped in the chat, to read plan drafts, to register for our upcoming meetings. Also on that webpage, you'll find a link to our frequently asked questions and comments. And on that page, you can see some of the comment themes and also download documents that have a list of all the comments that we've received. So again, thank you everyone for attending this meeting and for providing your thoughtful comments. And we will end this meeting just a little bit early. Thanks again.